memories for tonight. It's been so long since I got so close to someone. I know this ain't love, but let me stay a while. And pull me closer tonight, keep holding my hand. I know this ain't love, but let me stay the night. I said let me stay a while. 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 I said let me stay a No, no, I don't need a degree to know this ain't love at first sight. 'Cause I know how this works, I got my ABCs right. Oh, so let's play pretend. Say you'll be the one for me. Say you'll be the one for me forever. I know this will end tonight, but you'll be the one for me. Say you'll be the one for me. It's been so long since I got so close to someone. I know this ain't love, but let me stay a while. And pull me closer tonight, keep holding my hand. I know this ain't love, but let me stay the night. was too young, and I didn't understand that you were the one, and I can't wait to see you hindsight is fleeting, oh, and your heart's bleeding, and all you can see is red, till you discover it is within.